Welcome to Southend. Here in Southend, we're on the rail trail, which is the heart of everything here. It's funny because being here even over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it's grown to an insane amount. In 2015, it was actually the largest growth of a submarket in the entire United States, and it was 82% growth. So as you can see with some of these apartment buildings and some of the breweries and retail that's around here, it's just gone completely bonkers over the last few years. In Southend, it was a very industrial area, a very industrial part of Charlotte until about the 1990s when the city invested about $300 million into this area in order to very intentionally turn it from this industrial warehouse, mill type area to a very popular, high energy, mixed use type place to live. One of my favorite places in Charlotte is right here on the rail trail. It's Suffolk Punch, which I'm sure if you follow Instagram, Facebook, anything that I'm posting, you'll know that I'm here almost every single day. They pretty much might as well start charging me rent. But I like coming here because they've got coffee, lunch, dinner, they brew their own beer, they make their own cocktails, and it's super convenient for all of the people who are meeting me to either hop off the light rail or to be able to just walk here from their apartment complex in order to just grab a beer and talk about buying real estate. So behind me is the Arlington. It's famously known in Charlotte as the Pink Building. During construction of this building, they were told by the city that they were building it too high and it was higher than Southend was actually going to allow them to build. So because of that, because they got stopped short, they kind of as like a big middle finger to the city, decided they were gonna make the building pink and stick out like a sore thumb. And that's why we've got our pink building here in Southend. So right next to the Arlington is Factory South. These are loft style condos. They're very unique. It's actually an old Lance chip factory that was converted into condo buildings right here in Southend, which kind of fits the theme and the style of Southend and the history of Southend since it was very industrial. There were a lot of mills. I mean, even in this zip code, Bojangles was started here. The original one is right down the street from here. And fun fact, the original gold rush was actually in North Carolina, which is why in between Southend and Wilmore, you have what's called the Gold District. There's a lot of breweries and things that have been popping up there, but that is one of the lesser known facts about the Charlotte area. You're typically going to run about $200 to $400 a month for the HOA. What that breaks down to is about 20 to 30 cents a square foot. And some of those can actually go as high as $1,000 a month and as low as about $100 a month. And what's going to happen is as you start adding on more amenities in your condo building or with your townhome community, you're going to start seeing that HOA price start going up. The benefit of these HOA payments that you're going to be making is that it does cover things like a pool, concierge, building maintenance, things like that, which are hopefully going to help your living experience when you're living in these condo buildings or in these townhome communities. What's cool about this zip code is there's 3 main areas that are stacked on top of each other. So you have like Wilmore, Southend, and Dilworth. And so Dilworth is very residential, Wilmore is very residential, and Southend is very like mixed use. You've got a lot more apartments that are for rent in Southend, and then you have a lot more of the bungalows and some of the condo buildings in like Dilworth, mixed in a little bit of retail. And then in Wilmore, it's a very historical type of single family community. I like living in Dilworth because you're able to have a lot of walkability versus a lot of these other subdivisions around Charlotte. I live right down the street from here, and Harris Teeter is right up here in Kenilworth Commons, which also has Yafo, Duck Donuts, Bakersfield, which is like a cool little street tacos, margarita type restaurant. The walkability alone is what makes this zip code so attractive. Being able to walk to all kinds of restaurants, bars, breweries, coffee shops, you name it. That's what makes living in 28203 so attractive. My mentor came in from Raleigh, and this was the first place he took me because this was his favorite spot in all of Charlotte. Some of these bungalows here in Dilworth are just like sneaky big, so when they renovate some of them, they bump out the back, because what the historic district wants you to do is typically keep the frontage so that when you're driving down the street, it looks very similar to how it always has. You're gonna have homes that are from the early 1900s to 1920, 1930s, and you're gonna have new construction homes, kind of like some of these that look like bungalows. But these homes are really true to the character of this neighborhood that they've been trying to preserve for over 100 years. When you're over here, you're super walkable just to parks, schools. I mean, in Dilworth, you have Dilworth Elementary School, which feeds into Myers Park, which is right down the street. You've got all these restaurants here on East Boulevard, which is literally a block away from where we're standing. And then, I mean, if you really want to, you can even walk into Uptown from over here. It's not the shortest walk, but it can be done. In the last year, the number of closed sales in this zip code has dropped by 10%, which basically to me means that people are moving here and they're not leaving because of the proximity to everything and the flexibility that they have with the location. They're moving here and they just don't want to leave. In 28203, which is Dilworth, Southend, Wilmore, prices have risen 7% in the last year, which has outpaced the entire market, and we're just going to keep growing in this area. Now that we're in Wilmore, just north of the Gold District in Southend, figured we'd stop in on one of my good friends and past clients who bought a duplex in here last year and is actually in the process of renovating it. So we'll see if he's home. What's up, man?
Hi, Berkeley.
So how are the renovations going?
Well, as you can see, we're right in the middle of it, but I think it's going well.
It looks pretty good.
Yeah, the floors will hopefully be in later this week. They actually had to go in and redo the whole foundation, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, but it's sort of something you run into, especially when you're buying a 90-something-year-old house.
Yeah. What about Wilmore was so appealing to you? Because we looked for a couple of years and we looked at every house in Wilmore.
Right.
So what was the draw for being here, being close to everything?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, my thought was Dilworth was out of my budget, but I wanted to have the walkability to everything going on in Southend. And I think even being on this side of South Boulevard and not having to cross over that busy street, you're close to all the breweries, you're close to all the bars. I mean, you guys can see the tons of new construction going up everywhere. So I wanted the walkability close to Uptown and work, and then, you know, I've always sort of been drawn to older houses with character.
Yeah, and some of these houses in Wilmore, like these are the old bungalow style like this side of town.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, which you're going to do once you finish the renovation, is you actually have 12-foot ceilings in here, so they're sneaky big.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool architectural detail that just kind of gets hidden over the years. So the 12-foot ceilings for sure, like you can see the old fireplace and things like this that I want to keep, but then sort of modernize with, you know, light fixtures, newer flooring, kitchen, bathroom, things like that.
All that stuff, all the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
When we went to do the new foundation last year, you had to deal with the historic district. Did you have to deal with them for any of this interior renovation as well?
So yes and no. You have to get approval to pull any permits in Wilmore, but because this is considered an interior renovation, nothing on the exterior is changing. They basically just say approved, you're good to go, and then you're allowed to pull the permits. Anything you touch on the outside, whether it be siding, doors, windows, the porch, chimneys, things like that, then they do have to effectively do a review before they say okay.
Right, and that's very similar to when, if you're in a single family subdivision and you have an HOA with architectural review boards, that's kind of what the historic district is acting as.
Yeah, I mean, it has positives and negatives. I like you retain the historic character of the neighborhood, which is great. But at the same time, there are limits on what you're able to do.
So you've now bought a home in the historic district that you're going through renovations and your house hacking.
Right.
Between all that kind of stuff, like what would you say would be the biggest piece of advice for someone who's thinking about buying one of these?
Honestly, like, do your research. I mean, we talked about it. I spent years looking. I read the whole historic district manual, got tons of quotes on all the work that we've been doing just to make sure that I really had the best numbers and knew what I was getting myself into beforehand. So it's not like buying a brand new single family home. You really have to know everything that could go wrong and then account for, you know, little things you don't know are gonna pop up.
And basically when you go to budget for a renovation, double it. Whatever your budget is, just double it, because there's always going to be unforeseen stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've run into a couple things.
Yeah.
I appreciate you letting us stop by.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always cool to see what people are doing when they're renovating and when they're living in some of these different areas of town.
Yeah.
So that was why we figured it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I'm glad you can come see it. You have to come back when it's all done and check out all the new stuff that goes on.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Thanks, dude. The thing that you really need to keep in mind when you do choose to live in this area is that you are going to pay for that convenience, and you're also going to have some additional things that you're going to be dealing with compared to a normal suburb surrounding Charlotte. You're going to have an HOA in your condo complex, or you're going to find something like the historic district. And so it's really important to do your research, and I'm happy to talk with any of you about this in order to best understand what you're getting yourself into if you're planning on moving into this area. So yeah, in Dilworth, well, I did the so yeah thing again. Right next to the Arlington is Factory South. I don't like that.
Also, that's fine.
Is it fine if I wear sunglasses today like this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, here comes the light roll again. We might as well wait.